Okay, so it's been a while since I went through the entire process of making a mod, and I figure for my Lady Sigvald mod, this would be a good one to talk about because there are plenty of things that I haven't covered that I need to cover in this. So let's first start with the original mod. The original mod I defined using entirely with variant mesh definitions because I didn't know that asset editor existed at the time. So essentially, I just found body parts that worked on the skeleton I was looking to use, in this case, the female elf body, which is HU1B, and I just made something that my wife liked. And so this is probably not my, well, this is definitely not my best mod I've ever made style wise, but people liked it, and my wife, she likes it. So that's all that really matters, right? So while I could recreate it in Warhammer 3 using just the variant mesh, I'm going to go ahead and use asset editor just to so I have a file on hand that if I want to modify later, I can do that easily. So first off, I'm going to open my reskin mod, which is where I keep all of my models that I make. And I'm going to create a Sigvald play. So Sigvald, I'm just going to get a body from it. So if we go to variant mesh, variant model HU1C chaos, Sigvald body, I am going to open it up by double clicking, and I'm going to save this thing in my mod. Yeah. All right, so notice that warning will give you warnings sometimes. And I mean, that's the vanilla model, so you can kind of ignore those warnings unless you have like a million parts. All right, so we now have the file structure in place. So I'm not going to fit a model onto this skeleton because it's just not feasible to get an elf body to work on the chaos bodies. Scaling them up is not enough. The proportions are all different. It just won't work. So I'm going to have to modify, I'm going to have to change the animations, which is going to make it so that my mod won't work with like SFO and other overhaul mods that change stats because for whatever reason, stats and animations are defined on the same table. And so I will talk about how you as a person can change my mod to work on SFO for your own personal uses. I don't mind if you do that with my mods. Like, the point is for you to be able to play as a woman. And if you also like using SFO, then I want this to be available to you. But I'm not going to make an SFO sub mod because I don't use it. So not interested. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this thing. Let's start with a part. So first of all, the Dreadlord torso, HU1B, is what I used. So is torso 3, I believe. Let's take a look. Torso 3, yes. All right. So we have that torso. Now, notice it's humanoid 1B. We are going to get the legs, in this case, legs 2. Click and drag, and now I'm going to do the Wood Elf Glade Captain. Wood Elf Glade Captain, and it's head 5. Click and drag. All right, so this is the model, and I'm just going to right click, make editable, right click, make editable, so that we have that in place. Now, this model is good to go. All I have to do is go to my editable model. I'm going to change the level of detail here, distance. So I'm going to change it by a factor of 10. So it's 100, 200, 300, and leave that alone. Now the reduction factor, I'm also going to change this. So I'm going to change this to 1 for the first two, and it's on the second one, it changes the detail here. Okay, to 0.75. So this just makes it so that otherwise the level of detail is incredibly low. It's just weird in Warhammer 3 that they set them so low. And if this is a legendary lord, I want them to look good at a longer distance. Okay, so now we generate the level of detail, and I can refresh this to make sure that the polygons and everything matches what I expect. So notice the first two are identical, the next one's slightly worse, and then that. And in fact, if we take a look at this level of detail 1 is no different. Level of detail 2 is a little lower, and 3, it's lower. All right, so we have this model, and what we're going to do is we're going to save as, and this is in HU1C chaos, not props. Oops. Sigvald body, and I'm going to overwrite this. Okay, so we now have this handled. We're going to go back to here, right click and save it. So her body is now defined. Now, here's something that I realized recently because I don't use blood for the blood god. If you want the model to show blood on them, I didn't realize this because I don't use it, right? But if you go to tools and you generate a WS model for it, you need your character defined as a WS model. So if it isn't defined as a WS model, then it won't show blood splatter. So just something to be aware of. It's a minor thing, but that's literally the only difference between rigid and WS models that I have seen is that you need WS model if you want blood splatter. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go through to all my models that define with rigid models and create WS models of them just for those of you who use the blood for the blood god mod. Like I said, personally, I'm not into it. It just doesn't really look right to me. All right, but I still like to make things for other people. So we have this. Now, a few things that you should know. If we import her Sigvald's weapon, okay, I was asked recently, like, how do I show them in the animation, right? So if we take a look at the props, we have our sword, click and drag, and it shows down here. So first off, right click, make editable. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach it to prop 1 is one-handed weapons. All right, so now when I go to the animation, she will have it in place. Now it's a stupid animation, I get that. The one from H for the female like elf body is this stupid giant stag one. So instead you can go to filter and say like stand and then find one that maybe fits what you are doing. So going down, sword and shield, let's say stand here. All right, that's a little bit better. Now we get a better understanding of what this animation looks like. We're hiding this. Okay, so this looks good, but notice the sword is huge. Now, realistically speaking, Sigvald's sword is huge. It's way too big for him. So it could probably be useful to scale it down anyway, but I'm going to do that as well. And in fact, I've already done that in my original mod. So let me show you that really quick. Now, a few things to note when you are modifying weapons is something I'll show you in just a sec. So I'm opening my mod that had this. Variant models, HU1C, props. Here's the shield and the sword. So I'm going to open up the sword, double click. Okay, now notice this is a Warhammer 2 mod, so the skins are missing. And that's because actually, if we take a look at Sigvald's sword, it's named differently. So it's one hand O1. Here's just O1 or OT2 in this case. It wasn't defined by saying one-handed. So I renamed it O2 for my mod, but so what we're going to actually do is open the one from the other game, and I could scale this down, but since I've already done that on the other one, I don't want to do that. So, and I'll show you why that is. So I'm going to save that. Ooh, this is not the correct one I want to save it into. I want to save it in my Warhammer 3. So set as editable pack, and I'm going to save it here. All right. So now we have that sword in place. So what we need to do is take the sword that I want to use, my old one that I already rescaled. And we're going to take a look at, first off, if I'm editing weapons, the pivot is important. If I'm combining multiple parts from different weapons, you need to make sure that you copy your pivot to all meshes, because otherwise, if you notice the render box here, it renders in game differently from what it's showing in this. And all models are a little different. It's super weird. Don't understand why. But you want to make sure they all have the same pivot so that when you move them around in here, and they match up, that they'll match up in game as well. That's important. Otherwise, you'll have these different parts floating around disconnected from each other. All right, but I'm just working on this one, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and use the textures from Warhammer 3 instead of Warhammer 2. So we don't use diffuse anymore, or specular or gloss. We use normal, mask, and we also use base color, spelled the British way, and material map. So we're going to hit browse and find it. So if I type Sigvald into this, I can find the sword, and we are going to do a base color here. All right, the color's in. Now I'm going to Control C, Control V, and I'm going to get rid of this stuff, Control C it again, and instead of base color, I'm going to go to material map. So deleted base color, material map. So that's the material map. Now I'm going to do the same for normal, Control V, type in normal, and do the same thing here for mask. It probably doesn't have a mask realistically speaking, but whatever. So that is now defined here, and it's shrunk down. Now, like I said, if I shrink this down, it will then move a little bit. And so the reason why I'm just using my old model instead of the new one is because when I shrink it down, I then have to adjust and move it a little bit on the x-axis to fit into her hand correctly. And I've already done that for my old mod. Sorry. And so just don't need to do it again. All right, so essentially, if you're modifying something like this, you have to play around with it, see what it looks like in game, and if it looks right, cool, use it. Otherwise, adjust it. So we're going to go to the editable model and do the same thing here. Factor of 10, distance is 50, 100, 200. The only difference here is that the quality level, I'm going to call that 1 and leave the other one as 0.5. It's fine. All right, so create level of detail, double check that it worked, it did, and now I'm going to file and save as my variant mesh, HU1C, chaos, props, and we have the sword. Okay, so it is now saved. Now, same thing, if I want to create a WS model, I need to do so by generating a WS model here. All right, so we are good there. Now, it also generates materials, which we also need to import into our mod, just as an FYI. This material folder is created when you create a WS model. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing with a shield, with the shield. The shield, again, I had already scaled it down from my old one, so let's go ahead and double click and open this up. All right, I'm going to go through the same process as before. I don't need the diffuse, I don't need the specular or the gloss. Now, for whatever reason, the props often import correctly, but just to be sure, I'm going to go ahead and reselect them. So this is the Sigvald shield. So I'm going to pull up Sigvald shield normal, and I'm going to paste this in and do the same for this, but mask. Same here. Instead of normal, I'm going to call this the base color, spelled the British way. And then we have our material map. All right, so we have that. I'm going to change the level of detail as well, 50, 100, and 200. The reduction factor, 1. And I am going to create that refresh. Yes, it's working out. So I am going to file, save as, HU1C, chaos, props, shield 2. Okay, it's already there. Okay. So I can always rename, I'll rename these in the mod eventually, just as an FYI. We are going to, again, create a WS model. All right, so we have those taken care of. So now that we have the model for the character and the weapons, we are good. We can now go to Rusted Pack File Manager. We're going to say new pack file, add from pack file. First thing I want to do is obviously find my data. It's solid state, Steam library, Steam apps, common, Warhammer 3 data. And what we're going to do is we are going to go to data pack and open that up. Now, it used to be, when I made this originally, I just want to point out my old mod, you had to, in order for the voices to stick for your diplomacy and your campaign map, you had to make a start position mod because voices were connected to the start position, as crazy as that sounds. So nowadays, though, in Warhammer 3, which is really nice, you don't need to anymore. It's great. They're disconnected from it. which is awesome. I originally waited to release these mods because I thought I needed to wait for the assembly kit to be released. But then when the assembly kit got released and I went to make this mod, I decided, wait, maybe I should check. And I checked, and guess what? It works. It's super nice, thank goodness. So I don't need this campaign, but I am going to use several of these tables from the database, and maybe some others, we'll see. But I usually use this as a reference. I use an existing mod a lot of times as a reference. So I want agent subtypes, and I'll go over what these all are in a sec. Um, so I need to make this bigger. All right, agent subtype table. All right, clicking on that one. We need campaign character art set and table, maybe. I don't think we need both, but we'll double check. Culture to battle animation. We need front end faction leader table. Land units table. Main units table. Unit variance. To be honest, I don't think I need this one either, but just in case. Unit variance table. We'll take a look at it. And variance table. And I probably don't really need to mess with that, but we'll see. Okay. So all of those have been added. Now let's talk about the texts. The text. There's quite a few text that refer to Sigvald, and since I want to make sure that my mod, um, you know, is nice and nice. Oh, while I'm thinking about it, before I get into that, I also want to do diplomacy. So diplomacy strings table, I want to say. Let's double check it's diplomacy. No, but it's close. It's diplomacy key groups table. Nope. I'm looking for it. Oh my gosh. Key to diplomacy, key groups, negotiation string options. All right. I'm trying to remember which one because I don't usually, well, in the past, I didn't really mess with these too much. Let's see. Diplomacy, key groups, keys, strings. I did string table. String options. Here it is. Okay, I knew I had string in it. All right, anyway, delete these other ones. I don't need them. Okay, so this is for the voices in diplomacy. So I used to also have to use a start position for that as well. It was ridiculous. So I never really bothered. It was too much work for not enough payoff. All right, so anyway, we also need some text. And so anything that mentions Sigvald, I'm gonna go ahead and, deal with. So where is that located? Add from pack file. This is actually the lengthiest process, so I'm not gonna go over it, but we're looking for local.en or _en for English. And essentially, we're gonna go to text and database, and we're gonna add anything that mentions Sigvald. Now, how do I know which ones mention Sigvald? Well, originally I went through them all, but that was really stupid. Instead, I should go to View and make sure my global search window is on. And what I'm going to do is say Sigvald. I'm going to search. That sounds really stupid, but that's just how you can find like units. So this is in my pack files right now, but I'm going to go under like local, and I'm going to say like game files in general. So I'm going to search this in the game files. So this is all of them. And it will take a little bit, but now I have all of the local. So these are all the localization things that mention it. So I would go through and say, okay, I need my advice levels, agent subtypes, ancillaries, battle set piece, armies, and otherwise campaign group rituals. I'm going to just start tapping them in. Campaign group rituals. We have character skill level, details, skill node set, character skills in general, character trait, levels, custom loading, that I've never gotten to work, but we'll do custom loading screen components, diplomacy strings, we have effect, bundles, we have effects just in general, we have factions, we have front-end faction leader, front-end faction leaders, front-end factions, land units, we have loading screen quotes, missions, names, objects, subtitles. We have the main theme options. Interesting. Unit description, historical text, short text, and then custom. Oops. Whoops, did not mean to do that. I just closed out my checker, so I'm gonna have to change that, put it back in there. I just moved it around on accident. Okay, and then we have our custom battle permissions right there. All right, so that is every local thing that mentions Sigvald. And what I'm gonna have to do off camera, because it takes way too long, this already took too long, is go through each of those and change all the pronouns to she and change it from Sigvald to maybe Sigvalda, which is what I did before. Okay, so that's kind of annoying, but luckily the search makes that easier. Okay, now the other thing we're going to do in data is we're going to go to UI. And in the UI, we need our portraits, and we're going to have our faction leader, Sigvald. Since it's a faction leader, I need the Sigvald, the porthole for Sigvald, and the unit card for Sigvald. And what I'm going to do is actually import these from the one I've already edited, my original mod, because otherwise you'll have to right click, extract it, modify them in Photoshop, and then re-import them. So if I want to re-import the faction leader one, I'll right click on the faction leader folder and say add file, and then I'll upload it, and it will replace this as long as you kept the same name. Otherwise, change the name. Okay, so we have that taken care of. The last thing we need to do is add pack file variant mesh. Well, the last thing from existent here. So normally it would be under variants, but since this is a faction leader, actually a campaign variants. Might be campaign variants 3 as well, but I think it's campaign variant here. Okay, so the campaign variants now, if we take a look at this thing, we're looking for Sigvald. So Sigvald, and we add that in. Now, there are some characters that might be defined in 2 locations in the variant meshes. It doesn't happen very often, but somebody like Boris Ursus is defined in this normal campaign variants, and then also defined in campaign variants 3. So if you ever have run into an issue where the changes that you make in variant mesh are working in battle but not in campaign, that's an issue. And that came up recently, somebody asked about, so that's why I'm just mentioning it. Okay, so we only have this one though for Sigvald. Now, if we take a look at it, we have his head being defined, his body being defined, and then his weapons. So for me, I put everything into one body part, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click add from pack file, and I'm going to add the head thing that I made in asset editor. So if we go to our documents, well, for me, excuse me, my desktop, Warhammer 3, reskins, and we want to find our WS model, our rigid model as well, because it requires that. So let's talk about the props first. So we have the shield and its materials, And we also have the sword, and its materials are also in there. So we have like the sword and shield alpha. So we need all of those things for the WS model to work. If we're missing the materials, it's not going to work. The rigid model works on its own. That's why I've always kind of used the rigid model. It's just that, like I said, I recently found out that without doing the WS model, you won't see the blood on the characters. Okay, so now we're going to do the same for Sigvald. We have its body, we have the WS model, and we're going to put the materials. Okay, now I generally like to change the names of these things because the original is one, and so I don't really like to leave it in as that in case somebody's mod is using the original. So what I do is I click on this thing and I right click and rename. So we're going to change this to 2. Now, if we do that with the rigid model, the WS model, if we select it, we will see that its geometry is based on the rigid model 01. We want to change that to 02, just like we did here. We're also going to rename this thing to 02. We're going to do the same thing on the sword and shield. So the WS model is going to be defining geometry of the second rigid model. We're going to rename this to one-handed 02. We're going to rename our rigid model 02 so that the WS model actually calls to it correctly. We are going to the shield. Because the shield was already 02 from my old mod, then I don't have to make any changes to it. Okay, so we're good there. Now we have the variant models in effect. We have the UI, which we haven't yet switched over, but while I'm in that file, I might as well do that. So in this case, as mentioned before, I'm just going to pull from my old mod. So if I add from pack file, I'm going to go to my desktop Warhammer 2 mods, and I'm going to go to my Lady Sigvald Mod, and I'm going to add the UI here, and I'm just going to double click, and that will put all of those in there. So now if you notice, have the faction leader, the porthole, and the unit card. Okay, so we have added everything we need. Probably we might have some tables we might need to add more of, but we'll take a look at it. Now, let's first look at the agent subtypes table. What does this table do? Essentially, this table gives the campaign like agent. So the associated unit override is basically what main units this calls to. It has the audio voiceover actor group. This is the voice that they have on the campaign map, not in battle. That's defined elsewhere. And you know, it has a bunch of other things like recruitment types and stuff. So we have Sigvald is who we're interested in. Now, if we take a look at the voice actor, we want to change that. And like I said, in the olden days in Warhammer 1 and 2, we had to do a start position to change this. But for us, we're just going to go ahead and change it. Now, personally, I have a few options available to me for this character. Basically, I use Dreadlords for the voice of women characters who are evil, and I often use the Sisters of Avalorn for the good ones. But the other backup one is just to make him silent. I find that silent voice actors are also kind of nice because then they're not just screaming the wrong stuff constantly. So it just depends on which one you kind of want to go with. You can do any of these that exist that have already been made. And these actor groups are defined. If you mouse over here in the audio voiceover actor group, you can find all of those and see how they're made up if you want to create your own, as I did in the Keyslip Stalker. But for this, I think I'm just going to make it silent. Voiceover silent. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, oh, and ignore the has female name. That's not important for us. Even though we've turned her into a woman now, don't need it. We're going to delete everything, add row, and paste this back in. And now that I've affected it, I'm going to change it to Mass Mustachio Sigvald. Data. Okay. Next one, campaign character art sets table. So this one here is not actually needed in our case. So this is just setting the art set if we need to do certain things, like it references portholes and all this other stuff. So if you notice it, or not yeah, porthole overrides and things. This is necessary for some mods where I need to change the porthole if they like get mounts. This usually is for mounts and stuff, so I don't need it. Um, Campaign character arts tables. Let's take a look at that one. So here we have the animation. This is why we need this one. This is the animation on the campaign map, and that comes from the campaign animation sets enumerers name. So the animations on the campaign map are not the same as battle, and just because there's a battle animation doesn't mean there is a land animation to match it. But for us, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a Dreadlord female, and there we go, Dreadlord female, and we want to find their animation. It's Elf, Sword, and Shield. HU1B, Elf, Sword, Shield. That will work since he uses a sword and shield. So I'm going to, or now she uses, so I'm going to copy that animation, go to Sigvald, and I'm going to plug that in for my land animation there. Nothing else is needed for this, so I'm going to Control C, delete everything, add row, paste that in, rename, Max Mustachio, Sigvald. Now again, why I do this, and I bring this up in all my videos, why I rechange these names is that way it doesn't overwrite the basic data. If you leave it as data, it will overwrite all the original vanilla data. If you change the name, it will just add it to it. Okay, so this next one, culture to battle animation tables. Now, this is talking about battle animation. So we haven't actually set the battle animation yet. That's in land units table, so we'll go ahead and do that. But basically, he currently is using a, so if we take a look at Sigvald's animation, main animation is HU1C. We need to change it to an HU1B because that's the skeleton we're using. And also we're going to use the sword and shield. So again, it's going to be Dreadlord. So if we take a look at the Dreadlord, HU1B, not to be confused with HU1D, which is the elf male. We have an HU1B, elf sword and shield. I'm going to copy that animation. I'm going to look for Sigvald again, and I'm going to paste this into the main animation. Now, this table is the reason my mod will not be compatible with SFO and other overhaul mods, because land animation table, or excuse me, land units table affects, like, this is where you define the weapons that they use, the stats that they have, such as their armor and shields and their melee attack, charge bonus, melee defense, etc. So if they have buffed up those stats, then there's a problem. So here's what you do. You go to SFO, you take the animation that I use on here, okay, which is the Elf Sword and Shield. You paste it into the animation of SFO's Sigvald. Then once you've done that, you can just delete this table directly from my mod because you don't need it anymore. So you kind of have to edit SFO and my mod to make it work, but that's all it takes to do it. Anyway, so we're going to, oh, let's go back to Sigvald. I got sidetracked talking about that. So here's the thing, is that if you just plug in this animation, the animation won't work in battle because your culture doesn't have it assigned. This is an elven. Now, if you're high elves or dark elves, then it will work. And here's the weird one. Animations are loaded in by battle. So if you go into a battle against dark elves, it will work. But if you go into battle against somebody else, it won't. And that took me a long time to figure it. Well, when I started off, that took me a lot of stuff to figure out. It took a while. I was like, why is it working and when I'm fighting some people and then the animations aren't working other times? It's because it loads it in for the battle. And so if you have like Empire and Dark Elves, all the animations of the Empire and all the animations of the Dark Elves are loaded in general for the battle. So this culture to battle animation is what defines which cultures have what animation. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put in chaos because that's our culture pack we're going to do. And we're just going to replace one of these with high elf sword and shield. So I'm just copying this thing. I'm going to delete everything in general, add the row. We have the chaos has this elf sword and shield animation now. So that is good to go. Rename Mass Mustachio, Stalker, or not Stalker, Sigvald. Okay, so we've also dealt with the land units table here. Let's copy it and delete everything else because we don't need anything else. Again, I'm not changing anything else here with from animation. No stat changes, nothing like that. Just double checking. Again, this like is male. You can ignore. Doesn't matter. Okay. So just wanted to make sure we're good. Don't think of any importance there that needs to be mentioned. So we're going to rename this Mass Mustachio Sigvald Data. Okay, now let's talk about the diplomacy negotiation string. This was something I had to do, like we couldn't do without start position mods in Warhammer 2 and 1, but in this case, it's not that issue. So essentially, all of the strings, that is, when you open up a diplomacy with a person, the crap that they say when they like agree to stuff or disagree with stuff or just greet you is all defined here. This is the string, so this is kind of the thing that they say, and this is the group that it's dealing with. So if we talk about like group here and we say, I don't know, Sigvald, okay? So this is all of Sigvald's things, okay? So essentially what we need to do, and this is going to take a while for me, so I'll do it off camera, is go through and change the voice over to something else. So what I'll do most likely is I'll find a generic dark elf woman leader, and I'll use her voices most likely for all of these. Now there's a lot, and you're basically going to want to go through and just kind of match them up as best you can. And so one option is to just do a lot of like generics. So, you can definitely do kind of more generic stuff and whatnot, but it's just playing around with it. But this will change the diplomacy voice. All right. And I've never done this in my old mods because, like I said, it was just such a tedious thing to do in the Bob the Builder and Dave that it didn't work. So I just did not do it. So I'll go back through and do this later. Let's talk about the front end faction leader. So here we need to go to the key. So key, and we're going to go Sigvald because we have this uniform. I have no clue what the uniform really does, but we have Sigvald here. Now, this is where the faction leader picture is defined. We have the video, the front end video. Now, if I choose, what I usually do is I'll just choose a video that's like generic. So like Chaos Rises or something like that. And there's two things with that. One is, it's about chaos, so that's good. But the other thing is some of these videos won't work. They did work in Warhammer 2, but some of them don't work in Warhammer 3 like they did in Warhammer 2. And at the end of the day, that's also okay, so that when you're loading up your character, you just don't have a video and it doesn't feel that bad. So I like to just kind of remove his video and just replace it with something else. It's no big deal. Like I said, I just kind of choose something. And so we can say something like, really anything here, like Chaos Rising, Chaos Stirs. So if I did something like Chaos Stirs, it most likely won't work, but that's okay because it's not going to break it. It's just going to leave that space empty. The other thing is the voiceover. There's only certain voiceovers that are going to be available. Oops. Certain voiceovers that are going to be available. But what I usually do is if you put in a voiceover that doesn't work, it will just be silent. So I'll go to my agent subtypes and I'll take the voiceover that I'm using, and it's silent, so it doesn't matter. But realistically speaking, it won't work, and that's also okay. So when you select it, they don't say their name like Sigvald in some manly voice. So that's a big thing. All right, so we have that taken care of. And again, that's not overly important. That's just the front end when you are choosing your party. So it's like a really basic thing. So if you don't feel like you want to change it, that's also okay. But I just do it so that visually I'm not seeing a male Sigvald and I'm not hearing a male Sigvald. All right, so rename Mass Mustachio Sigvald Beta. All right, so now let's talk about land units table. So the land units table is where we're going to define voices. Um, so it also defines the main entity. Some mods might modify land units table. Oh, sorry, we've already talked about the land units table. Anyway, so it's not the voice. That's main units is where the voice is going to be. All right, main units table is what I was thinking. Okay, so we have the land unit it's attached to, and we move over. This is the one that might be adjusted. They might change costs and stuff. So that's also a potential issue because this is where the voiceover is defined. So, um, like what culture it's using and stuff. So essentially what you might want to do is if you see that Sigvald is defined here and has had things changed, you could just use mine and just copy it into theirs. That would work. You could also do the changes that I'm going to do in this, and that might be necessary depending on the mod you're dealing with. Um, if you have like a voiceover that's not changing. All right, so let's go to Sigvald. Now, we have his cost and all that crap. We have the voiceover. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna change this voiceover to Dreadlord one. So the Dreadlord has the culture is Dark Elves, so I'm gonna copy that, go back to Sigvald, and change the voiceover culture to Dark Elves. Then we have the porthole camera. Now this is Chaos Lord, so it's gonna be probably really tall. So I'm gonna find the Dreadlord and use what animation they use for or porthole they use because that will be the right height. So Dreadlord female 0 is the 650, and that's going to be what we're going to use because that's basically what we're using. It's the Empire General foot, interestingly enough. Okay, Sigvald. So we're changing that porthole camera. All right, now the voice-over actor group right here, this is where we're going to change this. Now, we have a lot of options, and in battle, sometimes I'm more willing to go with like the Dreadlord one. So if I go to like the Dark Elves Dreadlord female, I could do that. I could also, instead of Dreadlord female, I might go, okay, well, maybe I want them to be silent in battle too. I could do that. It doesn't really matter. It's just up to you. So I think I might do Dreadlord female and see how I feel, and then I might change it to silent if that bothers me. Okay, so we're gonna copy that, delete everything, add row. Okay, so we're there. We're gonna rename this as Sigvald. That's Mustachio Sigvald. Okay, now the unit variance table. I don't think I have to mess with this, but let's double check. This is sometimes necessary. Okay, nope, this just links a bunch of tables together, so we don't need that. Variance table. We only need this if we make some scale variation and stuff. We really don't need it. If we take a look at Sigvald here, Sigvald is about, yeah, 20% larger than the average Chaos person. And I could leave that in because at the end of the day, that scale of 1.2, so 20% larger than a normal Dark Elf body, would probably be good since it is a Chaos person anyway. They're going to be surrounded by big people. That should at least bring them up a little bit taller. So we're okay there. But otherwise, don't need anything. So I'm just going to leave it alone and delete that so that anybody messing with variants and other mods won't affect that. Okay, so now we have everything we need other than the fact that I haven't gone through and changed the text. And as a reminder, once I've edited the text and deleted everything, I do rename it to Mass Mustachio _ Sigvald or whatever. So I'm going to go through and have to change all the text that refers to Sigvald as a man, or even just refers to Sigvald, so it's Sigvalda, or whatever I end up calling her. And then I'm going to also go through the diplomacies here and just replace everything with some, dark elf leader voice or something like that, just so that it matches it a little bit better. All right, so that's all we need for this mod. There's a lot of things, sure, but it's a lot less than it used to be, thanks to the fact that we don't have to do start position mods. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save my pack file in my data as my Mass Mustachio Lady Sigvald. Save this. And I'm going to create a 256 by 256 PNG of the same name, put it in data as well, and then I can upload my mod to the workshop and I'll be done. So anyway, hopefully that helps you understand kind of how to change animations and how to maybe make mods that aren't compatible with your overhaul mods compatible with them. Because like I said, most often the issue is land units tables. And then if it's not that, it's going to be main units table. And if it's not that, it's like entities. But usually it's all of those three if they're using battle entities. I'm not using that for this one. But anyway, so those are the main culprits. So hopefully that helps you. Thanks for watching. As a quick aside, I forgot to edit the variant mesh definition. So I, imported it and I imported all of the models, but I need to define these now. So since I defined the whole body as just body 2 and WS model 2 here, I'm going to go through and get rid of the head. We don't need that. So slot up to slot head, get rid of that. The body is fine, except for it's calling to the first one. I'm going to call to the second one. And I might have to mess with the metadata to remove this Sigvald Lord metadata. Sometimes the metadata will define like the male growls, like stuff like that in battle. So you might have to delete that or change it out for some other metadata from a female character. But as far as I can tell, this was fine. As for the weapons, I need to make sure I give them their names. So this is 2, and this is 2 WS model. And now I have these all set up. So we have the sword, the shield, and the body that I created. Now we're good to go. So we're going to save that pack file. Anyway, thanks for watching.